the recording button. So the big thing with the chat is a lot of questions that come up when I've done this presentation, we actually have built in towards the end where we talk about myths and all of that. And also some people, if you're on a phone, sometimes the chat can pop up constantly and it can be really distracting. So if you've got a question that comes up while I'm speaking, please just write it down. And then if I haven't hit it when I get to the end, please ask it.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Jessica, for the clarification there. Okay, welcome to our AMATIC 2021 webinar series. Today's webinar, Growth Mindset, the Foundation to Success in Mathematics with Jessica Bernards. This is sponsored by Project Access. Any views expressed by the presenter are not necessarily the views of AMATIC, and any commercial products mentioned are not endorsed by AMATIC. McGraw-Hill is the sponsor for the 2021 webinar series. If you are not a member of AMATIC, we would love to have you as a member. You can sign up at our website. We have many Facebook pages other than the main one. Different regions have their own Facebook page to stay connected. There are plenty of other professional development opportunities through AMATIC, including our national conferences. And as of today, it's still planning to be live in Phoenix next year in Toronto. There will be other webinars and traveling workshop opportunities throughout the year. And the recordings of this webinar and other past webinars can be found at the webinar section of the AMATIC website. So with that, I will stop my sharing and I will turn this over to Jessica. Oh, wait, okay. I'm supposed to introduce her. Sorry.
Oh, do you want me to stop sharing?
No, you're fine. I'll just go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Jessica Bernards has been teaching mathematics since 2005. She began her career at the high school level and then transitioned to teaching at Portland Community College in 2010. She's taught a wide range of mathematics courses in person, online, and remote, from developmental up through calculus, and has created curriculum for all these levels. Bernards is a recipient of AMATIC's Lila and Simon Peskoff Award and AMATIC's Teaching Excellence Award for her work in mathematics education. She is also an author for Pearson. So let's welcome Jessica and see what she has to share with us today.
Hi guys. So today I'm going to talk about growth mindset and the foundation to success in mathematics. You're going to see I have on here as well my colleague's name, Wendy Fresh. She, her and I both teach at Portland Community College in Portland, Oregon, and we put this presentation together. Typically, we actually give this presentation together, but she was teaching during this time. But if you're going to be at AMATIC or know any colleagues that will be presenting over this kind of stuff again in Phoenix next month, which I'm excited about. So let's kind of get down to business. If I can get these slides to want to do what I want them to do. There we go. So the idea is hardly new. So this whole concept of growth mindset, when we started kind of researching it, we realized that this has kind of been around for a while. It just wasn't given this actual name. So it's pretty much the same. This is what the Washington Post wrote in an article. It's pretty much the same as the message that's been drummed into us by Aesop's fables, Benjamin Franklin's aphorisms, Christians' denunciations of sloth, and the 19th century chant invented to make children do their homework. If at first you don't succeed, try and try again. But something has changed. So the National Bureau of Economic Research did a study, and they found in 1961 that full-time students were allocating 40 hours per week towards class and studying. So basically, school was their job. They didn't have a lot of outside stuff. And in 2003, in this study, they found that full-time students were only allocating 27 hours per week towards class and studying. And now I would assume that it's probably a lot less than 27 hours. And there's some reasons for that. And so there's obviously some existing external factors now, social media. A lot of our students have other things going on. They're having to work. Some of them have kids. Some of them have, just a big household. And so that's kind of what's making this level of studying go down. And so what the National Bureau of Economic Research was able to conclude is that there's been a substantial change over time in the quantity or manner of human capital production on college campuses. So one of the other reasons I think this has happened is if we think about what our students are seeing nowadays with all of the social media out there, they see that end result. And so they see everyone's successes, but they don't see the work and the struggle and the mistakes that happened as they got there. I'm so sorry. There's a very loud garbage truck coming by right now. And so I think that's also a part of it. And that's why I feel like one of the best ways that we can change this is by showing students what a growth mindset is and how to develop it. And so first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you a video that Wendy and I created for our study skills series that introduces students to a growth mindset. And then we'll kind of help define this for you as well. And then after the video, we'll talk about where you can get these ideas from and where you can find out more. In this video, we're going to talk about how to achieve success by having a growth mindset. We live in a social media world where what we see may not tell us the whole story. We see the end product. We don't see the struggle, but the struggle is real and it's important. As author J.K. Rowling once said, failure is so important. We speak about success all the time, but it's the ability to resist or use failure that often leads to greater success. In fact, J.K. Rowling has firsthand experience with this. Known today as the author of the billion-dollar book and movie series Harry Potter, her path to being published included some major life changes, depression, setbacks, and being rejected by 12 different publishers before Harry Potter was finally picked up. She said, by every usual standard, I was the biggest failure I knew. If we let failure stop us, think of what we may never get to experience. But how do we develop the mindset to keep going? By developing what is called a growth mindset. So how can you obtain a growth mindset? A growth mindset is the belief that you can grow, that you're not fixed. A growth mindset thrives on challenges and sees failures not as evidence of personal worth, but as a springboard for growth. First, start by viewing failure in a different light. Replace the word failing with the word learning. Every experience, including mistakes, is a step towards a goal. As basketball player LeBron James said, you can't be afraid to fail. It's the only way you succeed. You're not going to succeed all the time, and I know that. Develop the growth mindset that mistakes can be good as they help us to learn things beyond what we have ever imagined. When you make a mistake, don't just give up and walk away. Instead, try to figure out what caused the mistake and rework the problem. If you can't figure out the cause of the mistake on your own, make sure you reach out to help from your teacher, a tutor, a counselor, or a peer. Part of the process of learning is knowing when to lean on others for support, and there's nothing wrong with seeking additional help if needed. Ignore negatives. Maybe you've told yourself, I'm not a math person, or I'm not a good writer, or I'm not good at, you fill in the blank. Even when you may not feel positive towards the subject, make it purposeful intention to persevere and do what it takes to overcome those thoughts. Attitude is key, and having negative thoughts only fosters negative attitudes. Stay positive. One of the best ways to combat negatives is to add the word yet at the end of a sentence. It's amazing how a small 3-letter word can totally change the meaning of a negative sentence into a positive one. I'm not good at this yet. I can't do this yet. It doesn't make sense yet. The language that we use is important. If you feel yourself getting negative, take a deep breath, maybe go for a walk, and then try adding the word yet to the end of the thoughts. It will make a huge difference. Set goals. What are your goals in your class? We live in a world of instant gratification, but real learning takes time. Set a long-term goal for yourself and devise a plan with short-term goals to achieve it. Make sure these short-term goals are small, manageable, and give you enough time to master the material. For example, maybe your long-term goal is to understand logarithms. To accomplish this, set short-term goals such as learning the properties of logarithms, how to graph a logarithmic function, and solving logarithmic equations. Just like an athlete needs daily goals and practice to cross that finish line, so do you in learning something new. After all, as Shark Tank entrepreneur Robert Hardbeck says, a goal without a timeline is just a dream, so make a plan. Think about how you learn. Just trying harder isn't the answer. If you aren't achieving the goals you've set, think about how you learn best and restructure your learning to include these methods. Maybe you learn best by talking it out or hearing it. If so, then joining a study group may be your answer. Remember, if you're wanting change, then you've got to change too. Make sure you have the appropriate speed. Don't try to do too much in one day. In music, the tempo or speed of a song is important. If the tempo is off, the music won't flow. It's the same thing when learning a new subject. Pace yourself. Be consistent and practice regularly, and you will find that your brain has much more capability than you ever imagined. Remember, the brain is like a muscle that is built through exercise. If you aren't working on learning a new thing a little bit each day, then you aren't exercising your brain, which will make achieving your goals much harder. Think of doing your daily homework in the same way a basketball player might practice free throws on a daily practice schedule. It may be monotonous and tiring, but that is good. It's showing that your brain is working and growing. Reflect. It is almost impossible to see how far you've come without taking time to self-reflect. Be proud of yourself, but also realize that learning something new is about the journey, not just the destination. Pay attention to what has worked and what has not. As Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor has said, success is its own reward, but failure is a great teacher too, and not to be feared. Believe that your intelligence can be developed. It turns out, if you believe your brain can grow, then you behave differently. If you see the hand you were dealt with as just the starting point, then it can open your mind to all sorts of possibilities. Having a growth mindset can actually change what you strive for and what you see as success. Having a growth mindset may mean shifting the way you look at things. Take the time to really try to foster this trait. You can do it. So I'll give you guys a link to this video at the end. We created it, we made it OER so that anyone can use it in their classrooms because we feel like this is extremely important for students to know. So that's kind of our little spiel about what growth mindset is, just to get all of us on the same page. But now I want to talk about some research that we did to create all of this, and then I'll give you some tips and strategies that you can bring into your classroom right away. So everything that I try to do in my classroom is always based on research. And so where did we get all these ideas? So we were really drawn to evidence-based research, and two women's work really caught our attention. And that was Carol Dweck and Joe Bowler. So Carol Dweck was a Stanford psychology professor who first developed and published the book Mindset. And this focused on parenting, business, school, and relationships. It really took the time to differentiate between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And that's kind of where this term growth mindset really came about. But again, it was in terms of parenting, business, school, and relationships. So not necessarily just dedicated to what you can do as an educator to help our students. And then Joe Bowler came around. So Joe Bowler is incredible. I'm going to show you one of her videos too. And so she's a Stanford mathematics education professor who published mathematical mindsets. So she worked with Carol Dweck, and this book really provided a correlation between a growth mindset and success in math. So she took those skills and those strategies and kind of definitions and theoretical things that Dweck had talked about in her text, and then moved it into how can this actually work in a specific subject? How can we work for this in a math classroom? And we all know as math teachers, math is one of those classes you usually will hear more people be like, oh, I hated my math class, or I'm just not a math person. You don't usually hear that in a lot of the other subject areas. And that's why it's just so important to bring in this growth mindset specifically into math. So what can you do as an instructor to foster a growth mindset in your students? On the next few slides, we're going to share with you some of those things, or I'm going to share with you, I guess, because it's just me today. So the first thing that you want to do is you need to actually introduce it to your students. And so by doing so, you want to get their attention and make it relatable. Tell those stories of struggles and success. So showing that video and having students reflect on it is one great way to do it. I also, in my classrooms, will just talk about it. So a couple of examples for you to actually be able to use would be author Theodore Seuss Geisel. So we know him as the super popular children's book author, Dr. Seuss, who sold over 600 copies of his book. But so again, we see that success and everyone thinks, oh, he just was a great writer. But what a lot of people don't know is he was not an automatic success. So his first book was rejected by 27 different publishers. And he didn't give up. He would go to a publisher, bring it, get rejected, go back, try to do a little tweaks to it, go to another publisher. And luckily on his 28th try, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street, his first book was finally picked up And now he's sold over 600 million copies and is a billionaire, I'm sure. Another person to talk about is that athlete, Michael Jordan. So he tried out for the varsity basketball team and didn't make it. He's known as being one of the best basketball players to ever play basketball. He ended up making JV team. And instead of just quitting at that point, being like, okay, well, I'm not the best and I didn't make the top team. He said, you know what, I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to talk to my coach, figure out what skills I need to work on, where I need to hone in these things, and just practice over and over and over again until I can make this varsity team. And so this kind of became his pattern in his life. He really picked himself off the floor and let his failure and disappointment drive him to be better. So instead of giving up when those failures happened, he took that, learned from that, and tried to grow. And so he's one of his favorite, like my favorite quotes from him is, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. So I love telling this story to my students, especially now that most of them weren't around when Michael Jordan was playing for the Bulls, but they've heard about him and they've heard that he's this legend and one of the best players to ever have been there. So telling the story, I feel like is great. Using that LeBron James quote that we have in that video is also another really good one to talk about. Another person that I have brought up to my students is singer John Legend. And so although he's super successful on paper after graduating college and working as a consultant, he knew he really wanted to be a performer. And so what John did is he actually, at night after work, he would write songs and perform local gigs, all while trying to get a record deal. And finally, after he was rejected for years by every major label in the industry, in 2004, he landed his first major recording contract. And as Legend says, the great ones aren't the ones that don't fail. They're the ones that learn from their failures and keep going. In fact, for as great as a singer as he is today, he still continues to set goals to improve his craft. And he is still working with a vocal coach to get better and not remain fixed, because he believes you can always grow. And then last, another one that I don't have a slide for, but everyone knows about the Dyson Vacuum. A lot of people do. All your younger students might not, but the Dyson Vacuum is a huge $4.5 billion. The guy, James Dyson, who invented it, is now worth an estimated $4.5 billion from Forbes. But what's interesting is that while developing his vacuum, he went through 5,126 failed prototypes before he finally got it right. So he failed 5,126 times, but didn't give up. And now he is worth billions of dollars because he, with each of those failures, figured out, okay, this didn't work. What can I do to make this better? And made those tweaks and kept on going. So the other way that you can introduce it is by using already created videos. So use available resources that are online. You can use the video that I just showed you. We'll give you that link at the end. There's also some great videos about growth mindset on YouTube, on YouCubed, which is Joe Bowler's website. On Khan Academy, they have a whole lesson on growth mindset. And so that'll really help kind of introduce it. The other thing with introducing it, that's important, but the other thing that's really important is allowing students to actually reflect on it, because that's going to help them personalize what you're talking about in growth mindset to themselves. And so one of the things that we do is after we actually assign that growth mindset video I showed you, we assign it as a discussion board for our online and remote classes and hybrid classes. Our in-person classes, we'll just show it in class and then have them talk about it, or we'll assign it as a homework assignment. But what we do is we have students after that reflect on what they've learned. And it's a super easy reflection. After you've watched this video, reflect on your top takeaway. So we didn't say you need to have paragraphs, or you need to have, we've said you need to have more than one sentence, but it's baffled me how, I've done this now for 5 terms and I have paragraphs that students are writing. I don't think I've ever once had less than a full 2 paragraphs that someone has taken from that video as they've reflected on it and how they're going to use that in their life. And so most of the time students really will just go out of their way to even thank you for exposing them to it. And a lot of the times I think too often we really assume that students have been taught on how to study and how to overcome obstacles or how to strive for greatness and not give up. But the truth is, due to so many factors, a lot of students haven't been exposed to these such a things. So here's a quote that we had from one of our students that said, and there were so many, many of us for us to choose from, but we felt like this was the most concise one. My major takeaway from this video is the advice on changing your perspective on failure from something bad to a chance to grow and learn. I know a lot of people, including myself, who are very afraid of failure and take it as a flaw in ourselves instead of as a learning moment. And I appreciate this reminder that failure is normal and what's important is what you do after you fail. I mean, what more could we ask from our students to get a takeaway from learning about growth mindset? So first thing is introduce it to your students. Second thing is to use growth mindset in your language as an educator. So you want to complement student effort versus their observed intelligence. So for example, instead of saying like, oh my gosh, you're so smart or you're so good at math, changing your words to say, great job. I can tell you've been working so hard at this, or all of your hard work is paying off. Look how much you've improved from this last assignment to this assignment. So talk about those types of things instead of praising students' ability. And so what Carol Dweck actually did a whole study over this, and she found that praising ability pushed students into a fixed mindset where the students rejected challenging activities because they didn't want to do anything that could expose their flaws or call into question their talent. They were afraid to fail because they've got this label now, you're so smart. And so now it's, if I don't do well on this, I'm not so smart. But if you talk about their effort, if so 90% of students that were praised for their effort were willing to try new challenging tasks. They wanted to continue to challenge themselves because they learned that they were getting praised for how hard they tried and not giving up and growing from those mistakes. And so they're more willing to take those mistakes because they don't have this label of you're so smart that they're scared of losing. I've actually brought this a lot into, I'm a mom. And so to my students or my kids now too. And even with coaching, I coach soccer and to little kids. And so, it's so easy for us to be like, oh my gosh, you're so good. Like, instead, just like changing that to being like, oh, look how hard you've been practicing at practice every day. And look at how good you've gotten from all of that practice. Keep up that good work. You're going to get better, continue getting better. And so just changing that vocabulary up, which takes a while to happen, but it really makes a difference. So the other thing is talking about how mistakes are good and making those mistakes actually help your brain grow. And so what I found is we really need those experiences to grow our brain. Mistakes, if you think about, your brain is kind of like a muscle. So the more work you do and the more work it's going to grow. And so you don't want to keep on doing the same thing. So it's very easy to do the same, 10 math problems over and over again that you're going to do well on, but that doesn't necessarily mean your brain's growing. You're just repeating the same things over and over again instead of taking them to the next level, to the next level. So you want to continue to kind of increase it. And one of the analogies I kind of use sometimes with my students is lifting weights. Like I couldn't start lifting 100-pound weight, but I could start with 5-pound weights until my muscles got really used to it and it was super easy for me. And then I would move up to 10-pound weights until it was really easy for me and I've done it so much, and then continue moving up. And so I use that analogy a lot. I'm going to show you guys a video from Joe Bowler's website, U Cubed, where she talks about learning from your mistakes. And I show this in my class too. I'm going to see if I can.
Welcome to lesson 3. One of the most exciting things I've learned in recent years that shocks most people I meet is this. When you make a mistake in math, your brain grows. Synapses fire in your brain. In fact, your brain grows when you make a mistake, but when you get words right, no brain growth happens.
When you make a mistake, you don't need to get the right answer. You just need to struggle and think about the mistake for synapses to fire.
That is because struggle and hard thinking are times when your brain grows the most.
This is why it's important in math class to work on hard problems that encourage you to struggle and even make mistakes, as these are the most important times for your brain.
Thomas Edison is a famous inventor. Over 100 years ago, he invented the light bulb, as well as many other important things. He allowed people to have light when it was dark, when previously they only had been able to use candles.
You may think he was just smart and probably didn't have to work hard, but that isn't true. In school, his teachers told him that he was too stupid to learn anything. Maybe that encouraged him more.
But it wasn't easy inventing a light bulb. He made 1,000 mistakes, but he didn't give up. He kept trying. When a reporter asked him how it felt to fail 1,000 times, he said he wasn't failing, he was taking steps. And he created something amazing. He is well known for saying this.
Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration.
I love that video. I think it just really brings it in for your students. And then the last thing to do as an educator with language is to use the word yet. So that word yet really helps students overcome that fixed mindset and go into that growth mindset. So things like you'll hear your students be like, I can't do this yet. So add that word yet at the end of it, or I'm not good at this yet. I don't know yet. When I teach, especially in person, which unfortunately we're still remote right now, but you always hear the conversations going on with your students as they're working through things. I flip my classes. And so with flipping, they're constantly working on activities and problems and groups. And so at the beginning of the term, I'll usually hear these things like, I just don't understand this. I don't get it. I'm just not a math person. And so I always stop and I'm like, yet, except I'm not a math person. I tell them that's not a true statement. No one's like, there's no such thing as being a math person. But if I hear like, I don't get it, this isn't making sense, I'll just say, add the word yet to the end of their sentence. Like, oh, I think you meant to say, I don't get this yet. And at first they look at me like I'm super weird. But then they start to kind of catch on and they see, okay, and you'll start to hear it in their own vocabulary as the term progresses. The language that they start using is this growth mindset language. And it's pretty amazing because just adding that word yet takes it from a negative statement into a growth mindset statement that I don't get it now, but I can get it if I keep on working at this. When I was actually putting these slides together a couple of years ago, this was when my son was in kindergarten. He came home with this Pete the Cat book. And so I was actually randomly on this slide and when it was started to be bedtime. And so I went and started putting him to bed. He grabbed this book that he had gotten from the school library and was like, can you read this with me? And I made him stop in the middle of me reading to take this picture because what this book is about. So Pete the Cat, anyone that has little kids, most of us know this is a great series, but it's this, I think it's Too Cool for School. So Pete loves math. His friend Tom doesn't like math, is not understanding math. And so Pete decides he's going to go home with Tom one day after school and help him. And so when they get off the bus, Tom says, I hate math. And Pete says, you don't hate math, Pete tells Tom, you just don't love it yet. And then they work together and Pete found a way to really explain it to Tom that Tom could understand and relate it to with toy cars. And then Tom ended up loving math. And so I just was like, oh, we have to take a picture because this is really hopefully instilling this growth mindset in children when they're young now. So you've heard me use fixed mindset and growth mindset. So kind of to break those apart, a fixed mindset is failure in the limit of my abilities. So I'm either good at it or I'm not good at it. I don't like to be challenged because I'm scared to get challenged. I don't want to, fail. I stick to do what I know. Feedback and criticism, I take personally. I can either do something or I can't do it. And so with growth mindset, failure is an opportunity to grow. So not just failure means I'm just not good at this and I'll never be good at it, but okay, I failed at this, but let's see if there's a way that I can learn from that failure to grow and get better at it. So I can learn to do anything I want. Challenges help me grow. Feedback is constructive. I like to try new things. My effort and attitude determine my abilities. So that's kind of that. We want to get students out of that fixed mindset zone and into that growth mindset zone. So then the last thing as an educator that you can do is to bring it in your action. So we've talked about how to introduce it, how to use it in your language, and now we want to talk about it, how to use it in your actions. So the first thing is when you're passing back exams, so use improvement levels versus class averages. So obviously we all feel good when we pass back exams to be like, the average grade was an 89%, like go me. But how does that make that student feel that got maybe a C on it? But for them, that was a huge improvement because maybe they failed before and now they're getting a C. That's a big improvement. And so what we really recommend and what research has shown is if you can find a way to report to the class on improvement levels. So maybe don't report class averages at all and find a way to focus on individual goals and improvements. So what I'll do a lot is I'll say like, wow, you guys made a huge leap from on the quiz over properties of logarithms. You guys were making a lot of you guys were making these types of mistakes. And I saw in this exam, you guys had stopped out doing that and you all were able to get these problems or understand these problems, something like that. I still sometimes will say the class average, but what I try to do is, because you always get those students that want it. But what I try to do is any of my students that are below that class average, I try to look at their paper and find a way to write on their exam, how they had improved. So like, wow, this was such a big jump from like, you improved so much from that last quiz, or wow, look at all of the hard work that you've been doing on your assignments lately. And that's really paid off with getting you to a C. I think if we keep this up, we can get you up to a higher grade on the next exam too. Like keep up the work that you're putting into it. So just notes like that kind of talk about improvements that you're seeing for each individual student, which does take time, but it really helps motivate them and it helps them to try to start to see and focus on their improvements and not just that letter grade like so many students do. Another thing is to utilize different learning tactics. So it most often will take different learning tactics for students to really understand a concept. So just because someone isn't getting it at first doesn't mean that they're not capable. So instructors can create these learning opportunities. For example, we flip our classes. So students will watch my lecture videos before class, and then they come to class and I run them through an activity before they work individually on problems. So these will include station mazes, where I have students work together and physically move around the classroom, Jeopardy, Kahoots, QR code activities, Desmos activities, all of those fun things. So here's a picture of, this is actually my class during a station maze where I have these problems all around the room. So by doing this, what we're finding is that students, you have students that sometimes do best by talking it out. So having that opportunity to work in groups helps those types of students. You have other students who need time to process it. So having that individual time where they're working on problems helps those students. Sometimes you've got students who have ADHD or have, maybe they're from a different country. And so, they're listening to you speak, but they're having to translate it in their head kind of. And so by having the videos beforehand helps those students because you've got closed captioning on it. So they're able to see what you're saying. You've got students can pause you. They can rewind you if they need to hear what you're saying, or just listen to it a few times before it really clicks. And they can slow you down if they need it. And again, they can take those breaks as they need to too. So it's really important to try to incorporate different ways of learning to really push those students into that learning zone, out of that comfort zone into that learning zone. And then help students set some small goals that are achievable. So instead of just, we always hear this at the beginning of the term, like, I have to get an A in this class from my program, or I have to pass this class. When I hear that, I try to say that's a great long-term goal. Let's set up some short-term goals that you can actually achieve to help you kind of go working through this long-term goal. And so by doing that, it really helps those students to create intentional habits. And so I'll just sit down with them and say, okay, so what are some short-term goals that'll help us reach this? So something like, okay, I'm going to get all of my assignments done on time. I'm not going to wait until last minute to do assignments. I'm going to spend this much time studying for and I'm going to make sure I pass these first quizzes. And so just little things like that are just these little, if you think about on that video, there was that lady that was walking up the stairs to that end flag. And so each of those little steps is just reaching each of those small goals gets you closer to reaching that end goal. So it keeps those students motivated. Along with that intentional habits and we have a whole series of study skills videos, and I'll give you guys a link to that too, if you want to use them in your classes. But a lot of what we've realized with teaching study skills and all of that is that it's not something that a lot of students actually were born with or have had. And so we really need to make sure they know about it, but also it requires some intention. And so we talk about how for us, like to make sure that we have time management done well, that we have a chance to hang out with our friends and get our schoolwork done. So we have a balanced lifestyle. We talk about using planners where we set up our time. You can do it on your phone. We talk about digital planners. Wendy, my colleague who does this with me, actually, she's old school. So she has a paper planner. So she shows that. So you really want to model that for your students and also have them add in those short-term goals. Like, okay, I'm going to reach this by this week, or they can put those in those planners. And then the last is it's so important to give students an opportunity to self-reflect. So when we mean by that, so obviously we've talked about that in terms of growth mindset with learning what a growth mindset is and how to actually do it. But you really want to help students see, like, so we use this as our learning management in our learning management system, this discussion post, like, now that you've taken this exam, what will you do the same and what will you do differently in preparation for the final exam? So ways to reflect on the scores that they're getting back and to look at some things that they've done well and then some areas that they want to improve on. So again, that's kind of getting that growth mindset in of, I got an F, like a fixed mindset would be, I got an F on this exam, I'm going to crumple it up, throw away, and just give up, to, okay, I did do these types of problems really well. This other area, I have so much work I need to do. So I'm going to make sure next time I do this, go through this exam review, I ask questions when I have them. So little things like that, that they can kind of set up as what they're going to be doing differently. And then as an educator, I try to sit back and I kind of keep a note record of those things. And if I see a student doing one of those things, I'll be like, hey, you said you wanted to make sure you ask questions right when you had them. And I'm noticing you're doing that. Hope, good job. Like, how's the rest of your stuff going for studying and getting ready for this next exam? So just little things like that I think really make a big difference. Another one we have at the end of the term is we ask students to give the next term students advice. And so, for example, what you can talk about what you wish you'd been more aware of, or on the other hand, what you did that was crucial to your success. So this is just kind of a way to, it's a way in the sense that we're saying, how'd you do in this class? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? What are you going to do differently? But we're not saying it that way so that students can be more vulnerable to talk. We notice that if we don't say, like, what would you do differently if you were taking this class again? Or what would you do different? Like, what did you not do well? A lot of the times it's uncomfortable to talk about yourself in that way. But if you do it as just a generic, what advice would you give to a student that's coming into this class next term? They're just they reflect so much more on themselves and what they wish they would have been more aware of, like time management or staying on top of assignments. A lot of the times, especially in the 100 level classes, I wish I would have realized that exam reviews are important for me to do. Getting ready for an exam, just doing the homework wasn't enough for me. And so just things like that get them to reflect on that. And hopefully they'll take those things into their next class that they're taking. And then the last we want to just talk about to really ensure that you're using an equity lens when it comes to growth mindset. So kind of like in the back of your mind, just think about, I'm going to foster a growth mindset in my classroom where students from all backgrounds feel safe to experiment, take risks, and make mistakes. Everyone is invited to communicate their unique approaches and perspectives, because there are going to be those unique approaches and perspectives on math and life in general, are free to develop their own identities as lifelong learners. So let's talk about some common misconceptions that you'll hear about growth mindset. I know that I totally had them going into this at first. When I first heard about growth mindset, I kind of thought it was one of those, like, everyone gets a trophy kind of thing. So growth mindset is about improving students' self-esteem and therefore just about making students feel good about mediocrity or failure. So this is what a lot of people think that growth mindset is, which it's so far from reality. So in reality, failure should be bad and it should be painful. We should all be motivated to work harder because we want to be successful. So as Dweck says, growth mindset is a tool for learning and improvement. It's not just a vehicle for making children feel good. And again, she says children instead of students, because in her book, it's a lot about parenting. So we really want our students to learn those lessons from failure so that they can avoid making those mistakes in the future. So a teacher might applaud a student for trying on a math test, even if they didn't do well. So one of my examples of this is I have a student, or I had a student, I'm going to call her Sarah, who had taken this class before, did terribly, took it again the second time with me. I didn't have her the first time, and she failed her first quiz, but then her next quiz, she got a D. Still not a great grade, but that's an improvement. And so I made sure to write on her paper, and if I had a chance to have a quick one-on-one conversation with her without other students, to just let her know, like, hey, look, like, I know that D isn't where you want it to be, but that's a huge improvement from your F. Like, what did you do that helped you get there? Okay, what are more things that we can add in to help you get to that C and then that B? So maybe you need to add in more practicing more, or more like, how are you studying for this? What are some changes we can do to your study habits to help it sink in more? And so just really helping students not feel bad about failing, but use that as a reason to be better and improve. So really reflecting on that. Another misconception is that if effort is so important, then when people fail, they must not have tried hard enough. So this is where kind of equity comes into. So we all know, especially that social inequities exist and play a super large role in success. So people of all sorts of situations, or they have all sorts of situations that are going to create these inequities. So some example are access to good education, people with a network of influential friends, people with money, a student who may never have had a parent or mentor to sit with them and teach them how to study or push them to think critically. And so by creating these opportunities in our classroom, we can really start to begin to level that playing field. So just to remind us, so equality is giving everyone a shoe, so everyone the same thing. But equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits. So oftentimes students are working at their peak capacity. The task is just beyond their means or realm. So meeting the individual student where he or she is and working within their own individual zone of proximal development is more likely to yield these positive results. So talking about Sarah, for Sarah, going from an F to a D was an improvement. And we still had to work on a lot of other things to help her get to the level she needed to be. Whereas I have another, maybe I have another student who got a B and went from a B to an A. So they're at different levels. And so just working with each individual student so that we can really, no matter where they come from, what their background is, really try to level that playing field in our classroom. And then the last is incorporating growth mindset into a classroom environment results in lower standard and rigor. So this is actually quite the opposite. So when educators or when an instructor has a growth mindset, it actually helps your students work at a higher level. We're going to help students learn how to work outside of their comfort zone because they're more apt to actually push themselves and take risks. They're not afraid of making those mistakes because they know that mistakes can be good, and they're going to persevere from those mistakes. So in reality, when educators are growth minded, their students progress. And when the educators have a fixed mindset, the students who entered the class underachieving left as underachievers. So that was a lot I just threw at you guys. And I feel like I talked probably way too fast, but this is the website I have with Wendy. I'll kind of show you guys if I can pull that up. But you can find everything you need on there. Give me a second. Okay, so this is what our website looks like. If you click on this YouTube link, that'll take you to our YouTube channel. I'll show you that really fast. And so on the YouTube channel, you'll see this study skills videos, and there's more that we're going to be creating as they come through. But we've got a lot on there with academic integrity, how to succeed in a remote or online class, test anxiety, how to achieve growth mindset, how to effectively watch videos for learning, how to study for an exam, effective practice, which I've been shocked that this has been the video that students have actually gotten the most out of. So why you should do homework and how to do homework the right way. So not using like photo math and all of those things. And we don't just say, don't use them. Like I think a lot of us say in our classroom, but we go through the research of how the brain works and how, like what they need to do, like what the reason for homework is so that you're ready for exams. And so how to do it the right way. Free resources that are available to students. Most colleges have all of the resources we talk about. And then how to achieve success by having a growth mindset. In this video particularly, so the one I showed you is just the generic one, but we have one that's specifically over how to achieve growth mindset in a remote or online class. And we did that one because of the fact that we found that students in a remote or online class, there's more struggle that they're going to have, like technology, online homework systems, and those things. So we took everything in the video that you saw, our generic growth mindset video, and we just added, there's like 2 more minutes added to that video where we talk about situations that can be frustrating and you might feel like you're feeling in an online class or remote class, and how to overcome those obstacles. So I think that is it for me. I'm sorry, Jen, that you can't hear it very well. I'm just seeing that chat. I didn't see that before. So if you guys have questions, feel free to type them in the chat and I'll answer any questions that you guys have.
And Jessica, if you can send me the link to your site with the PowerPoint, I'll make sure everybody that signed up can get that too.
Yeah. Let me.
She's doing that. Any questions? If you could just go ahead and type your question in the chat, please. So we do have a question. The Pete the Cat book title. What was the title of that book?
I think it was Too Cool for School. I think that was it. It's in, I usually have it with me, but it's in my 8-year-old's bookshelf that is crammed crazy right now. And so it's somewhere in his room, but I will try to find it for you.
There's another question. Do you allow students to do test retakes?
No. Nope, I don't. For various reasons, like everyone has different philosophies on that. So, you know, no one philosophy is better or right than others, but I personally try to tell my students, especially in my 100, 200 level classes, you really need to be prepared. And part of what I'm trying to do is prepare you for the real world. If you had a presentation you were having to do for your company and you weren't quite prepared and you bombed the presentation, your boss is going to say, okay, let's give you a second try. So what I do have in my reflected in my syllabus is I drop their lowest quiz score. And then I do replace so that I have 2 exams and a final exam. And so if their final exam score, which the final exam covers everything in the class, so it's typically harder, if their final exam score is higher than their lowest exam score, so out of exam 1 and exam 2. So let's say a student fails the first exam, gets a B on the second exam and a C on the final, that C is going to replace that F that they got on the first exam. And that really helps that growth mindset happen and come along, because it's like, okay, you didn't do well in this exam. You can still totally get an A in this class and overcome it. We're going to have to make some major adjustments though, going forward, so that you can do great on this final and replace this exam score. And then I work with them on that. So I kind of have that like get out of jail free card, if that makes sense. And then Bill, for the formats and software that we use to collect student reflections. So I just do it on my learning management system. We use Desire to Learn, Brightspace. You can do it on Canvas, any of those learning management systems that your college uses, Moodle, you can do them all on there. And that way they're able to see each other's reflections as well. So Daniela, what I kind of like about this, like with failing the first exam, is what I'll do is if I have a student that fails the first exam, I have a conference with them. So with flipping my class, it's opened up a lot of class time. So the day after, when I go to pass back exams, I do individual conferences with students outside of the classroom, so that I'm able to touch base with every single one of them and talk about what worked and what didn't work. And I have them do those reflections with me in person to help them out. And so what I'll do is if I have a student that fails that first test, we'll talk about, okay, what didn't work? Like, what was happening? Did you have too much going on outside of school that you weren't able to put the time in to studying? Like, what are some adjustments we can make? Is it because maybe your prerequisite skills aren't up where they need to be? So we can sign you up for this class that's like, we have like a MyLab, like not a MyLab, but like a lab class that helps with the prereqs for each of our classes. It's kind of co-rec, but not co-rec, if that makes sense. And we talk about the free tutoring. I talk about my office hours and what works for them. If those don't work, if there's other times that they'd like to meet. And so for the most part, I have not had a student that hasn't been able to come back from failing that first test. as long as they're placed in the right class. If you have a student that's placed way above their ability level, that should be like in a beginning algebra class, then that's usually, and again, that'll come out with your discussion after the first exam. Okay, I think you don't know how to do basic equation of a line and you're in calculus 1. So maybe we need to talk about moving you down. If that makes sense. Yeah. And Lewis, Flipgrid is really good. And Danielle, I think I answered that question. So I don't drop their lowest test score. I'll replace it with what they get on the final exam. Because I still want to see that they can do that work, because, you know, usually your first exam is over the first part of material of the term. Second exam is over that second part. And then your final covers all three, like, you know, what you did for the first, the second, and then leading up to the final. So I want to still be able to test, like I want it to reflect that lowest test score, or that test score to reflect what they knew about that concept as well. So they still need to be able to learn that concept.
Tatiana, I see you have your hand raised. If you have a question, you can type it in the chat and we can answer it that way. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
If you're interested in flipping too, I think if you go on our website, we've got some presentations that we've done over flipping. And that's made a huge difference in my classes, at least. So if you're interested in that, that's a whole nother you can tell Pat, I'll do a webinar over that too here if you need to, but we gave that presentation at AMATIC 2 years ago, but it's made a huge difference. So feel free to shoot me an email. I'll throw my email in here if you want to know more about flipping too. I can get you in touch with a bunch of resources for it.
Yeah, if there are no other questions, let's thank Jessica for her presentation and her good information today by a little chat message. And Jessica, thank you so much. I love the little yet thing. I never thought about that, but I think I'm going to start using that frequently in class. So we'll see how that works. We did get another question here amidst the thank yous. Are you seeing it?
So how important is it for teachers to have similar views about growth mindset and behave uniformly and use the language appropriately? How does it affect students when there are teachers with vastly extreme views? So this is tough, right? Because you can't force your views on anyone. And so you're going to have not uniform views. You can only really control what you do for your students. And so I think it's just you really do the best that you can for them with instilling that growth mindset in them by using those words yet and talking about improvements and setting small term goals and all of those things. If you have teachers like so Wendy and I have given this presentation at in-service at our college. So, you know, if you're able to get administrators to, you know, buy in and back you up, then you can give, you know, a talk about it and give them, because I think a lot of the reason that people have views that they're against this is that they believe in one of those myths that I talked about at the end there. And so I think if you sit through a presentation like this, which I'm happy to come to your college too, if you guys need it to talk about it, but I just think then you're really getting everyone on the same page. And then again, it's their choice with whether they do it or not, but it really does help those myths and those like wrong thought process about what growth mindset actually is to throw those out the door. Cause I was at first, like, I hate that every kid gets a trophy at the end, you know, and then you have people that are all for that. And so again, it's just, once I started doing research and seeing what it actually was, it's what changed my viewpoint around. So Lewis said, you mentioned about app students use, how do you address it again? I feel you give them ideas actually. Oh, so I don't tell them like photo math, but everyone knows that they have the solutions manual. So like in the book, I think you were talking about when I talked about effective practice and not using those apps. So we talk about just in there, like not going straight to the solutions manual or straight to something that where you see the answer or having someone work it out for you. And so we just talk about strategies of this is what you need to do instead of that. So first go to your notes, use your notes as a resource. Then if you're still stuck after looking at your notes, try to look through your textbook. Then if you're still stuck, reach out to your instructor or a tutor to try to work a similar problem, and then make sure that you know how to work this problem. So don't just learn how to do it for this problem and move on. Practice it a few more times since this is where you got stuck to make sure that you've truly learned how to do the problem. But I'll tell you that if they don't know about the apps yet, they know. I mean, you literally just have to put Google now, whatever math question you give them, if they just put it in Google and automatically Mathway and Symbol Lab pop right up. That's the first thing it says, like, oh, do you want me to show you how to solve the problem? Like Google gives it to them. So yeah, no, I'm not giving them a list of things, but again, like the things change, like there's more things that pop up all the stinking time. So again, I think it's not telling them the apps, but it's telling them why those don't help and what they need to do instead of going there. And that's what I think helps them stop doing that and start understanding the importance of homework. So if you want, you can, Luz, I'd recommend watch the video that I have over effective practice and you'll see how we did that. And just so you guys know, all of those study skills videos we did, Brittany Mosby, who's Project Access member as well, and works in the Equity Inclusion Office for the state of Tennessee. She went through our scripts and stuff to make sure we had everything like equitable and inclusive language in there. And as you saw in that growth mindset video, we tried to make sure that every student could kind of see themselves in it. So, oh yay, Bill, I'm glad you'll be in Phoenix.
Okay, do we have any more questions? A lot of good discussion questions here.
Yeah, these are really good questions. I appreciate it. Thanks, Katerina. It was so good to see you again. Yes, Edward. Oh, you know what? I have one last comment I want to say. So I wish I could have you guys do the raise hand, but I'm guessing a lot of you guys feel overwhelmed with all the stuff I just probably talked about. And so this is when I always tell at the end of my presentation, put your growth mindset hat on. You might not know how to do be able to use all of these strategies yet, but if you set those short-term goals, you'll be able to get there. So make a short-term goal of, okay, this week I'm going to try to really use the word yet in my language. If I hear a student or just myself, I'll talk about it to my class. So that can be your small-term goal. And then, okay, the next time I pass back an exam, I'm going to really try to focus on improvement levels. So just bringing those small, little manageable goals to reach that end goal. Get that growth mindset on yourself so that you can get there, if that makes sense. Oh, good. I'm glad you did a book. Bowler's book is great.
Okay, well, thank you, Jessica. Once again, thank you for a great webinar, and thank you all for attending. The PowerPoint and the recording and the links will all be sent out a little bit later today, and they'll be posted on Amatic. And everyone have a great day. And those who are going to be in Phoenix, we'll see you in about a month.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.